Greatly appreciate that. Second of all, the way things typically work at a meeting is city staff presents on an agenda item. It's open up just to the commission for technical questions. Once we're done with technical questions, we open it up to the public for comment. State your name and address, so we have it for the minutes. And then once everybody who's wanted to speak has had that opportunity, we bring it back to the commission for discussion and then a vote. And then we move on to the next item. With that, let's call the roll.
Thomas Wojtek,
Here.
Kathleen Propp, David Borstek,
Present.
Ed Bowen, Steve Cummings, Michael Ford,
Here.
John Hintz, John Kiefer,
Here.
Robert Weigert, Thomas Perry,
Here.
Andrew Mott.
Present.
All right, I'd like to welcome Andrew to his first meeting. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Now let's move on to approval of the minutes from the February 6th meeting. Do we have any corrections, additions, deletions, et cetera? Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion to approve them.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving on to item number 1, public input meeting on Oshkosh Avenue traffic impact analysis and recommendations for future corridor improvements.
Okay, the way we're going to start this out is Kelly Groyle from KL Engineering, who performed the traffic impact analysis, is going to do a brief presentation on some of the alternatives that were generated, that then focus on some of the recommendations that we'll be asking the Plan Commission to look at the end of the presentation. After Kelly's done with her presentation, first of all, as she's making her presentation, feel free to jump in and ask some questions because it's easier to answer it that way. After that is done, we'll open it up to a public input session where if the public has any questions, any concerns, we'll ask you to come up to the front, to the podium, and raise any concerns or ask any questions that you'd like. So with that, James or Steve, anything else I need to add at this point? I don't think so. All right. Kelly, why don't you go?
Okay. I'm here to talk about the Oshkosh Avenue area traffic impact analysis that was completed by KL. This presentation was given back in January 30th to the Planning Commission and some of the citizen boards. I'll do a little abbreviated version, but I can go in more depth on any area that you guys would like to know more information. Just to give some project background, again, many of you are probably familiar, we completed a traffic impact analysis from Washburn Street, which is on the west side of the interchange, all the way to Sawyer Street. What it did was it evaluated all the redevelopment on the north side of Oshkosh Avenue with Oshkosh Corporation, and then some planned commercial redevelopment right along the north side of the roadway. We did data collection, gathered traffic counts, did modeling, and came up with alternatives both for the corridor and then for the intersections. Our main focus was the intersections in the corridor that is operated and maintained by Oshkosh. So that was from Keller Street to Sawyer Street on the east side of the interchange. And then west of there at the interchange and Washburn, we just looked more at operational impacts, which we won't go over as much today unless anybody has some questions. So basically, the purpose of this meeting is to go through some of the alternatives quickly, talk about the recommendations, and get any input or questions from you guys and from the public. As far as future development goes, I'll kind of quickly go through this. Oshkosh Corporation Development is taking over some of the golf course that's there now, and then in addition to that, there'll be some commercial development on the north side of Oshkosh Avenue. As part of this, we'll have 2 new roadway connections, an extension of Keller Street to the north, and then an addition of a north leg at the North Westfield Street intersection. Just to give you a little bit more background about the process we went through, is we coordinated with East Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission and developed background growth, traffic growth conditions. So this would be any development outside of, or background growth outside of this particular development, to help us understand what the current needs of the corridor will be in the future. And then from there, we also developed traffic volumes for the new Oshkosh Corporation headquarters and that commercial development, and then assign trips to the network. Frozen? Oh, there we go. From there, we did a traffic analysis. We looked at existing, the development completion of 2025, and a horizon year, so about a 30-year lookout to 2045. We modeled with and without the development traffic and analyzed all the intersections from Washburn to Sawyer Street. So to start, we'll start with our corridor alternatives. Again, I'm going to kind of briefly go through all of these. Feel free to stop me if you do have any questions. To start with the existing, many of you are familiar. It's a 4-lane undivided roadway with sidewalks directly next to the curb section of the roadway. Here's some pictures of the existing corridor. As far as operations go, overall, it does have sufficient capacity for through vehicles all the way to the horizon year. I guess the main disadvantages are that there's no separated left turn lanes and poor lane utilization because of the lack of turn lanes in the corridor. As far as safety, without a median or turn lanes, you have a higher potential of rear end crashes and angle crashes because you have more conflict points. It's not as pedestrian friendly either without terraces between the roadway and the sidewalks. As far as access, you do have full access to all roadways and and driveways along the corridor to help provide optimal access to all. So overall feasibility, this, if you left it the way it is, it's low cost, it fits an existing right of way, but there's some safety and operational disadvantages. So that was our base. From there, we looked at 3 different alternatives. The first, just an enhanced 4-lane undivided section. And what this would do would be to add terraces, make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing and a little bit more friendly for your ped bike users. In addition, we would recommend adding left turn lanes at the Westfield Street intersection as part of this. Other than that, it's very similar to what you see out there today. The second alternative we looked at was a 2-way left turn lane. Essentially what this provides is you keep your 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, but you provide a center lane for turning vehicles. Either eastbound or westbound could use this lane to turn left at any driveway along the corridor. With the limited right-of-way from Eagle Street to Fox River, we would have to reduce to a 1 lane in each direction corridor, kind of typical section. This would provide a little bit more of a capacity issue.
To create a choke point there?
It could create be a disadvantage to trying to transition because you transition to a smaller 1 lane and then east of the bridge it's 2 lanes again for a while. So you'd have this, kind of 2, 1, 2. So, and that is one of the main disadvantages to kind of reducing to that. Here's some examples. On the left is one with a 5-lane twiddle that we could utilize between Keller and Eagle Street. And then when the right-of-way is a little bit more restricted, the 3-lane, just to give you an idea of what something like that would look like. As far as an operational standpoint, this does provide better access for left turning vehicles into driveways, a little bit more comfort level too, and provides better access to through vehicles because now you're moving that traffic away from the through traffic. It also reduces your conflict points, so you're less likely to see some of your rear end crashes that are happening when somebody stops to turn left in a through lane for a driveway.
Isn't this similar to what we already have on Jackson, and how does that work there from an accident standpoint? I personally find it confusing, but I may be alone.
Yes, the five-lane twiddle is exactly what we have on Jackson north of Murdoch Avenue. I'm not aware of a significant traffic accident issue over there. Yeah, if you've got, in particular, I've noticed like near Pick and Save and McDonald's, sometimes you'll get some opposing traffic that you just kind of got to wait it out, and you might have to pause a little bit to let one side clear before the other goes.
Got it.
Yeah, overall, you typically will see less crashes at something like this than your traditional undivided. From a feasibility standpoint, this does provide you the better pedestrian accommodations, give you more space to provide terraces and things like that. But the transition from the 5-lane to the 3-lane section would be a little bit more difficult, especially the 3-lane with the lift bridge. When the lift bridge is in operations, you only have one through lane of traffic that might back things up more.
And a follow-up on that, what was the time period that you conducted this study?
So we did counts in December. I think we got authorized to start on this project end of November.
The traffic counts were early December, so it was while Oshkosh West was still in session.
Yep.
Point being, and I'll raise this probably continually, but none of these calculations were done when the lift bridge is in operation. And maybe, at the end of the day, this becomes a two-parter. The west part and wherever the divider is around, was it Pequanna or whatever, someplace, one of those streets in there. But to effectively measure the impact of the lift bridge, whether it's going west or east, and probably and I can't remember the term that you used, but commercial or intermodal, which I assume were semi-trucks or things of that nature, is what was not only the impact, because it's a state highway with commercial traffic, but also in the summer months, the amount of boat traffic for people that are going to be using Rainbow Park. And I don't know how we factor that in to what our decisions are as we go further east on Oshkosh Avenue.
I think some of the things, especially as it relates to Rainbow Park, as we get into some of the intersection alternatives, might become a little bit more clear, Dave.
So the last corridor alternative we looked at was the 4-lane divided. This would provide a median area that Oshkosh could potentially use for corridor lighting, for trees, bushes, and make this a little bit more aesthetically pleasing corridor, kind of a gateway to Oshkosh. At the intersections themselves, for example, at Westfield, that would be reduced to a smaller section to add in those left turn lanes. Here's some examples of what this could look like. As you see from the top left, there's planted trees along the corridor and gives it a little bit more green feel and aesthetic appeal. The operations for this, as far as capacity is concerned, it's optimal capacity for all through vehicles. It does give left turn lanes at your major access points. The disadvantage would be that there would not be median openings at many of the existing driveways along the south side of the roadway. In order to access those properties, you'd have to make a U-turn at one of the intersections. With the roundabout, it makes it a little bit easier to feasibly do that. I should say, too, that this alternative would only go from Keller to Eagle Street. At that point, you would have to reduce back to a 4-lane undivided section, again, because of how close the buildings are on both sides. As far as safety, this is the safest corridor alternative. You reduce all your head-on, your angle, your rear-end crashes, and so you have a lower potential for those crashes to occur.
Can you point out Eagle on a map? Do we have that on?
Yep. I think.
I gotta go way back to the beginning. Yeah.
So Eagle, if I find out where this pointer is, Yep, is right here. So it's right after the park. So at that point, you can see that you have a neighborhood to the north, and several houses on the south side too.
So that alternative would be,
So in,
that one possible would be like a boulevard-like
correct,
to Eagle. Okay, great.
From Keller to Eagle.
correct.
Then we'd
Yeah.
lose the median, but keep the 4 lanes the rest of the way.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm. I think I just have to be more patient. So from a feasibility standpoint, again, this would provide the most aesthetic improvements or opportunities for those, would provide your pedestrian accommodations, would have that easy transition between Keller to Eagle, from Eagle to Sawyer, and just overall safety and operations would be optimal.
So the right-of-way acquisition would be to the south or to the north, or?
Right-of-way acquisition, north.
So those were the, I guess, 3 or 4 alternatives that we looked at from a corridor perspective. Does anybody else have any questions? So moving on to the intersection alternatives, and this, David, might get you a little bit more information about your question regarding the lift bridge. The Oshkosh and North Sawyer Street intersection. To start, I just want to kind of describe what's out there today. Overall, it's a little bit complicated. There's essentially 3 different signals that are operating together, and essentially each movement has to go through 2 types of traffic control in order to navigate the intersection, whether it's a signal and a yield sign or 2 signalized intersections. And they work together, but it can create some confusion. And it's a little bit interesting layout. The constrictions to redeveloping this or redesigning this intersection are the bridge to the south. There's also a monument right here that we wanted to make sure to avoid, and then to the east you have the lift bridge. So this intersection has a lot of complexities that can make things a little, oh, that works a lot better. Make things a little bit more complicated, and things we wanted to consider while looking at alternatives to make sure that we're staying away from those bridges and preserving the monument and whatnot. As far as operations go today, it has acceptable level of service. From the standpoint of the lift bridge operation, it's efficient at relieving traffic. Obviously, traffic is going to back up when the lift bridge is in operation, but from looking at different possible intersection alternatives, this signalized approach is one of the better ones to alleviate that traffic. Some of the disadvantages of the current intersection is that there are things that do not meet current standards with the way it's set up, with the multiple traffic controls at one location. From a safety standpoint, the intersection is a little bit confusing, and it doesn't have ideal pedestrian accommodations. I think the biggest thing with this intersection as it stands today is the lack of connectivity between the north and south of Oshkosh Avenue. So you have no direct access from Rainbow Drive, from North Sawyer Street, or from the eastbound side of Oshkosh Avenue. Any questions regarding what's out there today or observations?
In short, it's not good.
Yeah. Yep.
When you started your evaluation, did you check with the DOT about what the replacements timeline is for that bridge?
No, we did not. I'm not sure if you are.
We've had some conversations with the DOT. Do you remember that one's 20 plus, I think? Yeah, that bridge, I believe, if I remember right from our conversations relating to the Jackson, Oregon, I believe that bridge was, as Steve indicated, constructed in the 1980s, which would mean we're a good 20, 30 years out from a full replacement of that bridge.
So, and just the point that then we don't have to go through what we're doing on Oregon Street worrying about what the bridge is gonna look like.
Yeah, it's a long time before that one would be looked at.
So the first alternative we looked at was just creating a single traffic signal intersection and keeping the roadways as is, essentially kind of a minimalistic improvement to the intersection. From an operation standpoint, this would work efficiently, again, with one signal. It'd probably even work better with the lift bridge. And as far as safety, it provides a better, more conventional pedestrian accommodations and fewer conflict points, less confusion to those drivers that are using the intersection. Some of the access advantages of a signal in general is that it creates gaps in traffic downstream. So you have several unsignalized intersections just west of Sawyer Street. So a signal allows opportunities for stops on the main line, which does allow subsequent intersections to get a time to enter or exit Oshkosh Avenue. Some of the disadvantages, I think the big thing for this alternative would be that it doesn't provide that connectivity between the north and south of Oshkosh Avenue. It would remain the same as you see today. Mm-hmm.
On a practical basis, what are the principal access points to either Rainbow Park redeveloped or the park at the golf course? You know, where the traffic flow is going to enter? Where are the intersections that we're going to have to look at those?
Yep.
I think for Rainbow Park, with some of the additional alternatives that Kelly's going to get to, I think this intersection with Sawyer Street is going to become more of a primary access point. Right now, any eastbound traffic that's trying to get to the boat launch at Rainbow Park is, exiting at Pinocqua or Fox and, driving through the neighborhood to get to Rainbow Park to launch. So with some of the upcoming alternatives that get that access right here, right near the boat launch, it'll certainly alleviate some of that traffic through the neighborhood. As far as what may happen at the remainder of the course, I don't think the planning on that is far enough along to be able to say where the primary access is going to be. But with most of the land being to the west of the Corp site, I would anticipate probably seeing something off of the Keller Extended or something more in that area than off of either Pinocqua or Rainbow.
So really, we're looking at Sawyer and Keller. Access left. People utilizing the park system are either going to.
That would be my current expectation, yes, based on where the parkland is going to be available.
I mean, because that's really, isn't that going to be where we're going to have to focus either ease of access or deniability or difficulty of access from other points.
Right.
So that kind of leads us into the second alternative for Sawyer Street. This alternative would essentially look at some sort of extension of North Sawyer Street to connect into Rainbow Drive. The advantage of this alternative would be full access to and from Rainbow Drive from North Sawyer and from Oshkosh Avenue. So there's three different alternatives we looked at, and mainly the difference between these are just dependent on what right-of-way is available or what property acquisition potential, I guess, looking at different options to either affect the duplexes that are, highlight those,
Yep.
in that north area there. There's also the bar, which has Oshkosh purchased, or still looking at that?
I don't know if it's gone through or not, but I believe, Darren, have you heard anything from Alan? Is
I believe
that
it's in process.
in process? Okay.
So essentially, these three different alternatives look at different ways to either avoid properties or keep properties around. So alternative A provides a more traditional intersection design and is more pedestrian friendly, just because it is a normal 90-degree intersection. It does require the access of the two duplexes to the north of the alley. But overall, this intersection provides you your kind of optimal access to and from the Rainbow Park and the boat launch from Oshkosh Avenue. Alternative 2B is an extension of Sawyer Street to the alley. This requires probably the least amount of acquisition since it avoids the duplexes. But some of the disadvantages of this one is it requires more vehicles to maneuver in a tight space. There's only about 175 feet to 200 feet between the alley and Oshkosh Avenue. So when you got that boat traffic and things trying to navigate through there, it could make things a little bit more difficult. And then the third one would reduce some of the impacts to the north by creating a slight intersection skew. From an operation and from a safety standpoint, this would work okay. It's a little less desirable for your left turning movements, but I think further in design, if this was selected, you can make it work fairly well.
Or alternative 2A and 2B, the Reps Bar property, Darren, do you think that will remain commercial, or would that be included into the park eventually?
If we avoid,
Yeah.
we avoid it
For A and B.
for A and B, I can say, if we could avoid acquiring reps, then it can stay as a commercial concern from our perspective. So that's why we've developed several different alternatives. But I think that process is working itself out though. So I think we're looking at doing the acquisition.
I do have to say too, the sidewalk is very close to that property. I think it is even today, if you're out there, it's right in that corner, which can make things a little difficult.
It's a more efficient option for long term for that area is to buy it.
What is the stacking for the left turn lane going east on Oshkosh?
So, as you noticed, in all three of these alternatives, there's a very small eastbound left turn lane. And going into the next slide, I'll kind of go through that, is essentially with the limited right-of-way that we have in that area, because right where that red mouse is right now, whoops,
It's
I'm
real
not very
touchy.
good with this. These are not owned by the city, so we had to get back down to the existing right-of-way pretty quickly. So left turn lanes for the eastbound direction are not ideal in these alternatives, but do provide at least, we're hoping 25 to 100 feet that someone would be able to move over and get out of the through lane. And if any other property was acquired later, you could make that longer. Otherwise, it would be, it would work, but it'd be not ideal.
Don't worry about that pointer either. Everybody has that problem with
Okay.
it. So,
Pointer problem, not an operator problem.
So we're looking at sort of maximum, what is the car, 20 feet long?
Yeah, 18
Yeah,
usually.
18 is our
So it's-
standard
it's-
parking space.
It's 5 cars and 3 boats. Just to get an idea of what the potential bottlenecks are going to be there.
Certainly during
Can't be
peak
worse than
boat.
it is now.
Yeah, certainly during peak boat launch season, you may see some backup there. But you're right, it's, it's certainly better than the existing condition.
Yeah, but if we're going through this, we should make it as good as possible, not something that's sort of good.
Right,
You
and,
know,
and
especially because the second part of it is the again, the bottlenecks when the lift bridge is in operation, and I don't know how many times, what the movements are each year during the season, but the real conflict may not be on the, not because of what's happening west of the bridge, but with the people turning north, east of the bridge.
And one thing I don't think we brought up yet, but I think bears keeping in mind is, this is a longer-term project. This is not something that is, programmed even in the 5-year CIP at this point. This is a longer-term planning process to try to determine where we want to be with this intersection.
I guess I chime in too. I mean, are there any, strikes me there's not any plausible alternative, right? Because you can't buy any more right away, north or south, correct?
It's very limited, certainly, unless there's, some redevelopment going on, realistically more on the north side, that might be the only option. The houses on the south side are very close to the right-of-way there. It is very tight and very difficult, yes.
I think you struggle with the balance of, trying to provide optimal operations, especially with everything going on here, but yet, preserving some of the corridor that's adjacent to it. So it's a balance. If property is acquired to the north, you can easily extend that turn lane in the future.
I think one of the ironies is, my perception is that intersection currently is so bad that people avoid it, including people with boats. And, yeah, and if you make it nicer, it will attract more boats just because it's more usable.
And especially if we want to keep people off the residential streets.
Right.
But is one of the alternatives, as we look at making recommendations, splitting this? And let's just say from Eagle Street west and Eagle Street to the river. And giving that much more, and expanding the scope of the study to the east of the bridge, so that we have a more holistic study of the impact and have real summertime counts. I think that we may not be having the amount of information that we need to make any judgment on Sawyer Street. It's what our intuitions are, but there is 6 months of increased impacts there. The other question, and at least as you're looking at Oshkosh, did you talk with people at Oshkosh of what the zip code or street address is, so that we know how many people are going to be coming?
The trip generation for Oshkosh Corporation was provided by them as far as where their staff that will be at that building. Are they coming from west of the highway, south of Oshkosh Ave, or east of the facility? So they did provide input and information as far as that trip generation for KL to be able to incorporate into the model.
When you go through this, can you give us those numbers, please? Or is it?
Yep, it's in the report. Did you get that? It's
Yeah,
on
the first,
page.
we printed the first 48 pages, not all the
Okay.
data tables after that.
Okay, it's in the first 48 pages. It's 15. Should be on page 20. It's the trip distribution Oshkosh Corporation, so it's exhibit 4.4A. So those percentages were provided by Oshkosh Corporation of where their employees were.
It's easier to read. They have it broken down on page 16.
Oh, yep. I think overall with the lift bridge and the concerns there is, a part of our analysis, you're right, we did do counts in December, but we do consider seasonal factors and things like that when we look at things. We were very conservative on projecting development volume that would be in this area as part of the commercial development to add traffic. We also looked at background growth and went all the way to 2045 with an analysis. So I think that helps kind of assure that, when the lift bridge is down and intersections operating normally, I think you'll see good operations. Oshkosh staff also required a level of service C or better for all these intersections in 2045, which is a little higher than expectation than what you would see like with a WISTOP project and things like that. So they kept things, aggressive as being operationally adequate. That should help. Now, when the lift bridge is up, it's a different story. None of these alternatives are going to be perfect unless you build something to avoid the lift bridge. You're gonna have backups during that time. It's just how fast does your traffic control relieve those problems.
And I mean, but that's the point, that the studies didn't, you had data from in December or January, but you don't have data in June, July, August.
Right.
Arguably the height of the biggest negative interactions.
Right.
And you're going to have the biggest stackings at that intersection.
Right, and that's why we were a little bit more conservative on things and considered, like I said, a traffic signal. You can do things to interconnect them with the bridge if you wanted to really help operations. You can limit movements when the bridge is up to allow some movements to go. There are things that you can do to enhance, those kind of operational fluxes.
I think, absent any major land acquisition west of that intersection, there's not much else you can do.
Right.
I think you've
You're
given us
very
all the
constrained.
alternatives, no matter what the boat traffic is. These are the alternatives given the constraints that we have.
Yep.
Better than what it is.
Right.
Yep.
And I would say sorta, but there may be some things we can do to help ourselves east that aren't on here. Take away left-hand turns on Arboretum, for instance, making that a median across through to High Street, for instance, so there's no left turns, so that you just clear that traffic through.
Well, and that might be a longer-term thing to look at from a traffic standpoint, but it's certainly well outside of the scope of this analysis or where this analysis is going.
And I disagree. You're correct that this is where, but the analysis should have been and should be that portion of it, which is arguably as bad, almost as bad of an intersection at High and Oshkosh Ave, or Congress Avenue at that point, that they work together, whether it's going east to west or west to east. And when you look at, how many of us have gone west to east, and you can't clear the bridge because people are turning left at east of the bridge. And if we're looking at increased traffic, we're looking at increased use of Rainbow Park. We're going to be wanting that to be a highly utilized intersection that we're doing ourselves a disservice of incorporating that right now. Everybody, I agree that we have to redo the Sawyer intersection, but we still have to look at that planning of what's happening on the other side of the bridge as part of our planning.
Let Kel finish.
Okay. So I think we've talked a lot about these performance measures already for this intersection alternative, but the main benefit of this would be that it combines Rainbow Drive and Sawyer Street roadway accesses to one single intersection, so that provides direct access to and from Rainbow Park in all directions. And this would avoid any of the cut-throughs that is probably happening now through the neighborhoods and things like that, especially if improvements are made to Rainbow to make a bigger area for boats and whatnot. So the last alternative we looked at was the roundabout. This one was a little bit tricky with the constraints I talked about earlier of fitting them in fitting a roundabout in between the bridges and the monument. But it would look something similar to this. Looking from an operational standpoint, it would work well during normal times of the day. However, it would have unstable traffic operations during and after lift bridge operations. So overall, although this alternative could work with the lift bridge there, it's not recommended. So those were the ones for Sawyer Street. Moving on to Westfield, we looked at two different alternatives: a traffic signal, which would be very similar to what's there today, except you would have the north leg added to the intersection, and then there would be left turn lanes on Oshkosh Avenue. As far as operations, this would provide acceptable operations in the future and would provide those left turns into the commercial development and then also to Oshkosh Corporation. It would also be nice for pedestrians. You would have pedestrian signals there with the daycare and the high school and things surrounding this intersection. It provide easier access for all modes of transportation. And then it does create those gaps downstream, like I talked about at Sawyer with the traffic signal alternative. The second alternative for this intersection was the roundabout. As you can see, the footprint's a lot bigger for this type of traffic control. And just kind of looking at some of the performance measures, you would have acceptable level of service. You could have that continuity or consistency between the intersections to the west. However, as far as pedestrian friendly, it'd be a little less friendly to those multimodal users. And it wouldn't create those gaps in traffic downstream for those unsignalized intersections. So I think for the most part, the higher cost and significant right-of-way makes this alternative a little bit more difficult. Lastly, the Keller intersection with Oshkosh Avenue. The existing, here's a picture of the existing. Our goal was to minimize improvements here and only improve things as needed since this was recently built. So based on our traffic generation, the south approach, excuse me, the north approach would have unacceptable level of service during the PM peak. So, sorry, I lost my voice. Basically, if I, that.
This one right
Yep.
there.
So the main movement out of Oshkosh Corporation would be from this roundabout. So during the PM peak with a single lane, the existing roundabout would see some operational issues. So to kind of improve that, we would recommend an additional lane for that approach, and it would look something similar to this. From there, it will be a very busy intersection during the AM peak. We do anticipate by 2045 that there'll be some queuing as you get closer to the interchange, just with all the development in this area. But it will operate at acceptable levels.
And the additional lane that's being shown on this approach is a right turn only lane, so traffic on Keller Extended would get a dedicated right turn lane onto Oshkosh Avenue. The existing lane that's there will become a straight or left turn lane, whereas with the single lane right now, it's all three movements. So because of the high volume of traffic that we were getting from Oshkosh Corporation saying, there's a lot of traffic leaving our site to get to the highway or travel west, created a high volume of right turn traffic, which is why we wanted to look at, this dedicated right turn lane being added to this approach.
So is there property acquired then along would be the west?
It looks like there'd be a little bit to develop the lane at the south end, but not the entire length, if I remember correctly.
No, you'd be able to tie back in if you wanted.
So it looks like starting, we're here about the middle of the building or so is where there'd be a little bit in order to develop the extra width here for the turn lane and the sidewalk in this area.
So just to go through the recommendations, for the corridor recommendations, from Keller to Eagle Street, the recommendation would be the 4-lane divided section to allow for optimal safety and operations, and also provide that aesthetically pleasing and kind of gateway corridor for the city. And then from Eagle to Fox River, since we are very restricted with right-of-way, stick with the 4-lane undivided, and you could improve things such as provide terraces and whatnot, whatever the city would desire to do there. From the intersections at Sawyer Street, we would recommend either 2A or 2C with the traffic signal extension of North Sawyer Street. So essentially either going straight north and connecting into Graham Avenue, or providing that slightly skewed intersection would be the recommended alternative. At Westfield, it'd be the traffic signal with left turn lanes, and then at Keller, the roundabout with the right turn, southbound right turn improvements. And I think that's everything. Questions?
Is Westfield before or after Eagle?
Westfield is west of Eagle.
So, can you go back to that picture of Westfield? Where, that doesn't show the median in it, does it?
Yeah, you can see here, the median approaches, and then the median minimizes to allow the space for the development of the left turn lane. Again, there said you've got the small bit here, and that expands out to the median once the left turn lane is not there.
And why not a roundabout there?
A roundabout would work there. I would require more right-of-way, so it would take away from some of that potential commercial development. Also, with
It's a killer for pedestrians.
yep,
Yeah, with the
exactly.
park development there, I would.
And you got the
Park,
high school, you got the daycare. It's a little bit more pedestrian friendly to have pedestrian signals available for pedestrians, and again also the downstream traffic too of those unsignalized intersections at Eagle, Fox, and whatnot, to allow those vehicles to have an opportunity to enter and exit at Oshkosh Avenue.
And then on Keller, I think I heard that it's going to give us acceptable level of capacity, but what is the lifetime acceptability of that? What is it? Is that a 5-year,
Our-
2025, or,
Our target analysis was a target year of 2045.
and that'll give us enough for,
The goals was a level of service C or better in that target year of 2045.
All right, do we have other additional questions for Kelly before we open it up for the public commentary? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone here from the public to speak to this item today, we'd love to hear from you. If you could step up to the microphone, state your name and address, we'd appreciate it. Come on up, sir.
Hi,
Hi.
Joe Schweda, 1309 Oshkosh Avenue. And I guess the only comment that comes to mind is I'm a bicyclist, and I just didn't hear any comments about bicycles involved in the new corridor, so I'd like that to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other additional comments or questions?
I will say that I did get one call before the meeting today from a resident along Oshkosh Ave, just probably east of Eagle. I guess they were concerned with the amount of traffic that's being developed out there. It's going to happen with Oshkosh Corp. They have a hard time making left turns out of their driveway, going to go west. Is there anything that can be done to alleviate some of that, to make it easier? I'm not sure if there is an answer on that. I guess the other concern she had was traffic and speeding. So anything relating potentially to traffic calming was a concern that I heard.
Also, I should mention for the gentleman that had the bicycling question, we did discuss this at the meeting in January. I think one of the issues that will be considered there is just the level of car traffic, how much it works with bikes, but that was discussed at that meeting. Are there any additional questions or thoughts to share?
I think, and on top of that, we're looking at alternative routes in that area to get you away from that roundabout. So we are looking at that.
Well, we're gonna have that whole lakeshore.
There'll be another one, yep.
So, I mean, it doesn't have to be on a state highway.
That's the hope, yeah. All right, if there's nothing else from the public, then public commentary is closed. Back to the commission. I think you're looking for us to approve this universe of choices. Am I?
Yes, if you look at our recommendation on page 4 of the staff report, we were recommending that the Plan Commission adopt KL's recommendations for the TIA as follows, and you can see the general corridor improvements, and I should have separated out intersection, but if you see A, B, C, and D, we were asking that you take a vote. I think the Traffic Review Advisory Board voted on each of these items, right, Jim? A, B, C, D, and E, or not? Okay. So we're requesting you to have a motion for each of them.
Well, basically how they did it is they voted on KL's recommendations, but they specifically recommended one of the 3 alternatives for the Oshkosh Sawyer.
2A or C?
Yep, between 2A and 2C. They first voted on one of those 2, and then they voted on the rest of the recommendations.
So we're asking you to adopt each of those recommendations.
Thompson and David.
I'll move it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. David,
I'd
discussion.
just like to, and I may be the only one, but I'd like to split off, recognizing we have to do something at Sawyer, is to split that off. And until we get a full seasonal set of data, and look at the east side as well as the west side, that not have a recommendation, even though it may, at the end of the day, be what one of these 3 looks like. But I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice without looking at it holistically.
I was going to add one comment to that. You know, east of the bridge is one issue, but I know when KL did their analysis, the traffic figures they used from the DOT were from the summer of 2017. And then they also did factor in some seasonality, so it's not that wasn't considered, just so you're aware that those numbers do account for summer volume.
But do they also take into account backups and pinch points, you know, that type of negative interaction, left-hand turns on the east side of the river?
Like James stated before, the east side of the river wasn't part of the study, so.
I understand that, but how do you make an informed decision when you're only looking at half the issue?
Jim, I know from my experience traveling over that bridge, what occurs on the east side doesn't really impact the west side much. I don't know what your experience is over there in transportation.
Yeah, I would agree that I don't think there's necessarily a huge correlation, but I mean.
And I just, you know, in my experience, it's just been the opposite. You're going west to east, bridges up. Even in normal traffic, people turning left, going into Arboretum or Driver, if that's the street that's going in there. But when the bridge goes up, it's even worse. And you're shoving people all, you know, there's just no movement because you also have that negative interaction all of a sudden. That's the left lane is the through lane, and if you're in the right lane, you've got to turn right onto High Street. So it just seems to be short-sighted that we don't look at that whole interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree that, but I don't know that the issues are related, but they could be. But that area over there on that east side of the bridge has some unique characteristics, you know, whether it's related to the west side of the bridge or not, but there are some unique characteristics in that area. That's definitely a consideration. But I'll let Kelly jump in.
From an operational standpoint at Sawyer Street, the issues of left turns east of the river shouldn't impact the alternative at Sawyer Street itself, because you're going eastbound away from the intersection. I don't see any alternative at Sawyer that would improve that particular issue other than improving that intersection itself.
Any other discussion?
So are we looking to make a recommendation on one of the alternatives for Sawyer intersection, A or 2A or 2C?
It's, we have a motion on the floor and it's been seconded to this thing as is.
Well, we do have and you're right, I'm looking at our number C. It says Oshkosh Ave, North Sawyer Street, alternative 2A or 2C, traffic signal with extension of Sawyer Street. So I guess we could read in, it's still gonna be an extension. I mean, it's still basically the same recommendation. It's just extending it north.
Yeah, the difference between the two, like Kelly covered earlier, is the 2A. The main difference is that that's more of 90-degree angles, so it's more like a traditional four-legged intersection, and it would require probably the acquisition of one of the duplexes north of Oshkosh Avenue. The alternative 2C, I believe, the main difference there was it avoided that duplex. But then it created a little bit of a skewed angle for left-turning vehicles or for that intersection. So I believe that was the main difference.
Yeah, and so it'd be a little bit more difficult for maneuvering of boat traffic and things like that, but it would work.
But basically, the motion is that we're okay with 2A or 2C. Is what, that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion?
Would that come back to us at some point?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's up to you guys how you want to do it. Traffic review thought that they should pick one of the two, so they made a motion to accept one of those two, voted on that, and
Well, we have
But
a
you guys
motion
can
on the
do how you
floor.
want.
We have a motion on the floor to pick either one, so.
If it needs to come back, it'll come back. So I'll have to look at it, because if there's land acquisition involved, likely it'll come back to you.
Any other discussion? Okay, call the roll.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Orsick,
No.
Ford,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried. One.
Okay, moving on, item number 2, official mapping for an extension of
Kelly.
Northwestfield Street, extending north of the Oshkosh Ave.
Give us a minute to.
All right.
I can do this for Jeff, seeing he's not here today. I'll make sure you take it out on him next time he's here. Lucky it's an easy one. This is basically the official mapping of North Westfield Street. It relates to what we were just talking about a little bit. But this all relates to developing the global headquarters. What we're proposing to do is map an 80-foot right-of-way from the intersection from Westfield on the north side to, let's see. Here we go. Item number 2. So what we're requesting is the official mapping for an extension of North Westfield. As you can see, here is the subject site. It is part of the development we've been talking about. You can see Oshkosh Avenue in North Westfield. The mapping lines up, I believe, with the center line of North Westfield Street. So you can see it's about it's an 80-foot right-of-way by about 400 400 so odd feet. So you can see it in here. We proposed to line up with that extension of Keller Street through here, and then eventually there'll be North Street access to the north. What the official mapping does, it allows us to reserve that area as right-of-way for purposes, for the future. Mr. Hoopman will be working on developing that area. Will now know that the right-of-way is going through there, and he'll set up his development accordingly to reflect the right-of-way going through the area. What else has he got in here? So that kind of shows a black and white of what's going on with the potential mapping, the point of the beginning, and intersecting at Oshkosh Ave. And basically, we're asking you to approve of the official map as requested and laid out in the staff report.
Are there any technical questions from the commission about this mapping item? David?
I take it that this would be what, 4 lanes and sidewalks, and that's sort of what it's planned?
Steve will come up and help with that one.
I believe from the KL presentation, if you caught the it's actually a 3-lane, it's a single lane in on Westfield with 2 lanes at the intersection for left, right, or straight. I'm not sure exactly how those are set up to be marked, but that's what was shown in the TIA that was just went through.
Which mirrors the other side of Westfield as well, right?
Correct.
Any other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this mapping item today? Once? Twice? Okay, public comment is closed. Back to the commission.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Borsick,
Aye. Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0.
Okay, moving on. Item number 3, this is a zone change from institutional district to single-family residential SR5 district for property located at 1650 Villa Park Drive.
This is a cleanup action. If you can recall, I think we disposed of a portion of this land. I think it was last year. It was part of the park, but it was a triangle. It was a really weird shaped piece of land. I should get this far. It was a really weird shaped piece of land. You can see it. So last year we had an action where we disposed of this section of land from the park to this property owner. And what happened was our park was zoned for institutional purposes as a public park. So now it's kind of a split zone parcel with that between single family and institutional. What we're requesting is we're simply cleaning it up and making that former chunk into residential zoning. So this will then become SR5 zoning after this action.
Got it. Technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, call the roll, please.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Harry,
Aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Borsick,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 6-0.
Item number 4, another zone change. This is zone change from Central Mixed Use District, CMU, to Central Mixed Use District with Plan Development Overlay, CMU PD, and approval of a general development plan and specific implementation, spelled incorrectly, plan for property located at 566 North Main Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So, we've discussed this project previously with the applicant at a workshop. This is the owner of Fletch's. They had come to you kind of in a preliminary discussion. They were previously approved to do an outdoor patio space, and while doing that, they would like to raise the height of the fence around their outdoor patio. In order to accommodate that, we have to go through a couple of steps. The first is adding a plan development overlay on top of their existing zoning. So that is where our zone change from our central mixed use district to the central mixed use district with a plan development overlay. That then it gives them the ability to come into this board, request a plan development to raise that fence height. So they're applying for both the general development plan and specific implementation plan at this time. Just general location of the property, it is on the Main Street corridor, is within our central mixed use zoning district. So here is kind of an aerial close-up of the property. Fletch's would be kind of the southern white building, if I can find my cursor here. And I can't.
Sorry, we can.
556 North Main, with the outdoor patio immediately south of that. Here we've got a kind of drawing of where that outdoor patio space is being proposed. So the outdoor patio in and of itself was previously approved. Today we're just here to discuss that fence height. So here is a drawing of the currently proposed fence by the applicant. Staff would note a couple of things. Right now, our zoning code, with the code change in 2017, says that any fence must be architecturally compatible to the existing building. The present fence, as shown, is not necessarily architecturally compatible and of the same materials. So if this board is in favor of the fence as shown, they would have to add an additional base standard modification onto those listed within the staff report to approve a fence of this nature. But just discuss the fence a little bit. They are showing an 8-foot fence, which would be code compliant in the front. And then as it wraps around the south side of the property along AECom's property, it would be a standard 8-foot fence with an additional 2 feet of lattice on top of that. That fence would then kind of wrap around the east end of the outdoor patio area and then return north into the existing building. They are showing a little bit of landscaping in front of it, and the applicant has indicated a desire to do some additional plantings inside of the fenced area as well. Staff did kind of try to take a look up and down the Main Street corridor to see what other fences have been established that may be in keeping in character with the buildings. And I just have 2 examples of other fences that are immediately within the vicinity along Main Street. Here you can see is kind of a brick fence that kind of mimics the buildings to each side. And this is a smaller fence that just kind of goes into a parking lot. But again, they did use some brick elements. Just to kind of show you some examples of other fences that have been done. Okay. There isn't another fence in the area at Peabody's that is a similar wood style to this, Darren said. So there is one in the area that is similar to what is being proposed presently. Speaks from experience. So a couple of conditions. We are recommending approval of both the zone change and the GDP SIP level. The first is that the final landscaping be approved by the Department of Community Development, kind of keep it in nature what we've done with this type of projects in the past. They are not required any landscaping per code for this project, but we just want to make sure that the type of plantings and stuff they choose do meet our ordinance requirements for, salt tolerant and species that are commonly used in this area. So just kind of that oversight, making sure we're not doing anything that would not be consistent with what we've done in the past. Staff is recommending that the sign be attached or integrated into the fence instead of sitting on top of the fence. We've seen that done in a lot of other areas. It also kind of by being on top of that entryway gives a 10-foot element to that front portion of the fence. And we would like to see that front element of the fence remain at 8 feet and the 10 feet doesn't start until it wraps around. So we're just recommending that sign be integrated into the 8-foot portion of the fence. Base standard modification be approved to allow the 10-foot fence in the side and rear yard. And that Plan Commission have final approval of the fence design that is architecturally compatible with the design and materials of the principal building. We just want to make sure that this body does have a chance to approve the final design of the fence. If they're happy with what is there being proposed today, you can approve that as you see fit. Or if you would like him to come back with an alternative design, that he can bring that back to you. And finally, there is a driveway, and I wish I had a better picture of it, an old driveway that goes in front of it. Department of Public Works has requested that drive entrance be closed and returned to curb and gutter as part of this project.
I have a technical question. So, is Peabody's fence approved?
It was pre-code.
Okay.
The 2017 code introduced this element of saying fences should be architecturally compatible with the building that they're in conjunction with.
It's good, wow, Technically, it's not conforming.
Okay. Other technical questions? David?
Was there something, did I see something about concern of stormwater runoff?
No, the stormwater was previously approved as part of the outdoor patio space.
I thought there was,
That the fence could be on the ground.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. It was noted in the original approval of that outdoor patio that there be a 4-inch gap under the fence as to not negatively impact the existing stormwater runoff plan.
Other technical questions? Okay, seeing none. Anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
I'm Jeremy, I'm the owner.
Could you give us your address, please?
Sorry, Jeremy West, I'm the owner and the petitioner. Just a couple questions. So can we go back to the slide showing the fence real quick?
That one.
So if, and I certainly have no problem bringing that fence down in and integrating into the fence. And then I think at that point, I would maybe angle it so the lattice wouldn't be at a 10-foot right on Main Street. It would go at an angle back up, you know, at least, so it'll go about 7 feet up, so it doesn't look like it's just one wall. I think it would look a little bit better if it was at an angle leading back to that second post. And then as for like the curb, we were looking at, and I've talked to building inspection, is we were looking at using part of the front of that and possibly putting a food cart there concerning the driveway that goes in there. And came to my attention that that they were gonna try and make that part to get rid of that curb or get rid of that driveway. So I don't know if the fence has to be contingent on replacing that. Does it? Yes. Why? I'm just curious. Sorry.
Code requires that once the driveway is essentially closed, that it's no longer a vehicular access for a parking area or anything, that the curb cut would be closed. That parallels along with that. What we see when they're not done is people start using these driveway entrances to pull up and park on the sidewalk, use it to get into spaces where there are no longer legal parking spaces and continue to try to use them as parking spaces when the area behind it has been terminated for that use.
Okay, but my question is, we're going for an extra 2 feet of fence. Why is that part of a contingency on this? Should that, I mean, I'm just asking for 2 feet of fence. I didn't know why that would be contingent on the 2 feet of fence. If we want to talk about that another time, I'm all right with that. I just don't know if that's just been included as part of this for some other reason.
Because was the original fence approved with the original patio plans? Right, the original 8-foot fence was approved at one point.
Right.
There wasn't that contingency on that at that point.
I mean, 8 foot, I don't need approval for the 8 foot on that. That's the code.
In order to get the permit for the fence, though, the driveway would have to be pulled.
Okay.
So in terms of what we're being asked here today.
I guess I'm just seeing it as I think it's just adding on right now to being like, we want this done for sure, so to only get that, you're gonna have to put that on that. That's what it seems like to me.
I think Steve was saying that they were gonna order the curb out regardless, right?
So why, I just don't know why it's on this then, why that's on part of this.
It came up as part of the review for your general development plan specific implementation.
Okay, but I guess I'm just seeing as, I'm not trying to be, you know, I just don't know why it's part of this then, if that could be a part of something else.
Well, I mean, it can always be pulled off, and then Public Works, we can talk about, I mean, we can have another discussion on it.
Sounds like it's gonna happen either way.
Correct.
But I mean, has there been any other places on Main Street where theirs are still there, but have not been forced to do anything with?
No, we've moved some, I can't recall all of them.
Along Main Street, Along Main Street, I don't believe anyone has, since the reconstruction, sought
Since
to abandon or
reconstruction.
relocate a driveway at that point
Can we
in
go
time.
through your slides? Right there.
That was part of the condition, was to remove that and restore it. In fact, that doesn't look like the driveway in front of it, actually. I can't quite tell from that picture if it is or isn't.
It's not.
driveway there.
I guess,
That is, it's an additional one that will have to get ordered out then.
Anything else?
What about, weren't there a couple other conditions? Jeremy, come back up.
Pardon?
Weren't there a couple other conditions you had concerns with on there?
and then the other thing is I might not go, this picture might not be quite accurate. I don't think we're gonna go to a full 8 feet on the very front. When I had the person that I was able to do this, and there'll be more spacing on the front, but obviously on the front, we'd have to look at materials that would be compatible with, the building, what you guys would consider.
What are your thoughts on that, Jeremy? I mean, first of all, the Plan Commission needs to come to a conclusion on that, because we have the compatibility, that which again is a new standard. So if the Plan Commission is fine with that, then you just adopt the proposal as such. Otherwise, yeah, we do have that design review that, you're supposed to have something that's more compatible. He has some extenuating circumstances versus some of the others. If you looked at where Barley and Hops are, or where Peabody's is, you've got a shorter run between two old buildings, two building sites where you had a gap tooth in the wall. Here you're running all the way back, so they don't have a building wall that's that side fence for them. So it is somewhat of an extenuating circumstance. I think our main concern is probably the front, is that integration at the curb level.
I mean, I personally haven't given any thought, because today was the first time that that's come to my attention, that is something that I would have to consider. So I don't know. I would, I mean, obviously the front of Barley and Hops' patio is something that would probably look good in this situation as well. It is done out of stone, and, stone and that light colored brick, which would probably look closer. I just haven't really, like I said, I haven't really.
There's two different things. I mean, if you look at what you're proposing versus the Barley and Hops is more, it's more open to it's more, it integrates itself with the street a little bit more. Yours is kind of, there it is. So you can see what's going on back there, which is a certain design theme. It's what they wanted to do. You might want to close that off a little bit. I think from our perspective, just from a staff perspective, from a downtown perspective, we prefer to have more interaction at the street level, but that's a conversation that we've not had with the Plan Commission to date.
So if we were to approve this whole thing as is, would you still consider going back and looking at fencing? In which case he'd have to come back, right?
Yep.
Is that something you're comfortable with?
I mean, I've got to get to work on it at some point. That's my only issue is.
We may not approve it as is. I'm just.
No, I understand. I guess I just don't know what to say. I don't know.
Well, it'll be part of our discussion.
Okay.
We may ask you to come back.
Sure. I'm sitting right here.
Right. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? Okay, back to the commission. Let's help this gentleman out. What would the commission like to do?
So if we had concerns with what the front looked like, are we talking just the front, and would we separate out the long run?
You could definitely do that.
You could do it. I think what we were saying, I think our main concern was that interaction at the front versus the whole side. We understand we know it would be impractical to say put in, 90 feet or so of wrought iron and concrete fence, because that'd be a huge investment over and above what Jeremy's already done on the two sites, and he's done a wonderful job. So
What's the green colored thing?
I think that's supposed to be a landscape.
Feature, bush, whatever, like a boxwood.
There now, or?
No,
This
it's
is
not
all
there.
proposed. So, the fence, the reason this is before us now is the fence can only be up to 8 feet. He
Correct.
wants to go 10. It doesn't have to be 8 feet. It can be below 8 feet like the other place. Okay. Mike, you had a.
Oh, no, I mean, I think it would look nice if we could find a way to integrate that patio into the, kind of the sidewalk scene. That's why they adopted the ordinance, correct?
Right.
Well, it's kind of, we were trying to get a more consistent design aesthetic down in the downtown area. So, that's why we're trying to our recommendation was to look at alternatives, especially on that front one. I think we're less concerned on the side, but the front is where we're more concerned at this point. It's at the staff level.
So,
Share that concern.
Okay, Tom.
so he can build an 8-foot fence now?
You can build an 8-foot fence, but the material comes back to us for review.
David, do you have your?
No,
Okay.
I don't have a problem if we just look at the front and that we look at some kind of compatible material.
So we could vote to approve this with the condition that the front part of the fence be.
Come back.
Come
Yeah,
back.
come back.
And then we have the issue of the
Curb cut.
sidewalk, the curb. I mean, is it possible, if that is realistically an issue that will have to get sorted out one way or another, why do we need it?
We don't need it on the plan development.
Okay.
Is there any reason that, but conversely, if it's something that's gotta be done, and this would be something that we look at.
Opportunity to do
Yeah,
it.
opportunity that you that's one of the conditions of developing the property.
I would be
So
fine with
there's,
it.
so we don't go through this whole thing
Again.
of sending, the building inspector to give a notice or whatever.
Well, that comes from Public Works, so.
Or whomever.
Guys, can I just?
Yeah, sure, come on.
Real quick, I was just talking to him, and this is my question, and for you guys, is that, can it be, if the curb can get done, can I have 2 years to get it done? I've dropped about $250,000 so far, and I don't even know how much that's gonna cost me. And I would, if I have a couple more years to recoup some of my investment, I have no problem with doing that. Right now, I'd like to say I'm gonna park something there, but I'm really just saying that because right now I don't know how much that's gonna cost and my cost. And if I have 2 years to get it done, I would gladly get it done just to try and recoup some cost that I'm spending right now.
I think that's okay. Before you park anything there, talk to us.
I'm not,
Okay.
you tell me not to park anything, I won't park anything
Just
in
talk to
there.
us,
I
let's
just-
figure it out.
If I can get a couple years to at least
Okay.
be able to afford it a little bit more.
That would simplify this for everybody. I think.
Okay.
Jeremy,
Thanks.
why'd you want the 8-foot fence in the front? What was the thought behind that?
Well, I mean, obviously.
I understand the side, but-
Yeah, the side. Well, you want a fence to be able to control people going in and out. A gate and a fence. And as for the fence, I was looking at lowering it. To be honest, I was looking at lowering it to about 7 feet on the front, and then having about 2-inch gaps between. So when you do see, I don't want it to look like a wall of wood where no one can see or anything. I mean, if people look through and they see other people in there, they are going to come in. So I want, I want people to be able to see in there for that reason. So.
Yeah, and you see that, and it's not atypical. If you look at Anduzzi's up on College Avenue, they have that same kind of design theme. It's a higher fence. It's probably a 6-foot fence, but it's a wrought iron style fence, so you can
Right.
see what's going on back there.
And a little bit higher fence along the side and along the back. For one, like I discussed in the workshop, I want people to feel enclosed, but also I want that a little bit higher because those are the sides that if someone is going to jump over that fence and try and climb for security purposes, an 8-foot fence, a 10-foot is a little bit more difficult. I'm not so much worried about someone trying to do it on Main Street. I'm more worried wrapped around there as well. So the way it looks now, and when I've been out there and looked at it, I'm like, that fence is a little bit too high for me on the front. I would like to lower that and then put the bigger gaps just for people to be able to see in and see. Because if they look at it and they like it, they're going to come in. If it looks sketchy, they're just going to keep walking by. So,
All right, thank you, sir.
yeah, thanks.
All right, what's the pleasure of the group? Sounds like we can add to the 5th condition that he has to do that within 2 years. Good. What about number 4? What do we want to do with that?
We just put in the front design fence? Instead of the final design?
Yeah, you could bring the front fence, or what is that? Was it the east fence? What is it?
West end of the fence.
West facade fence or west fence be brought for final design approval by the Plan Commission.
I'm not entirely sure you need to do that though, because they approve the fence design, and if it's different in the front, different in the side, they're still approving it as it's worded.
And we could approve it as it's worded now, and if he wants to dicker with it, he can bring it, he can work with
Right.
you guys, or? You have to come back
What
here.
I like
Am I
about it
missing-
is that we let them know what the
Yeah,
expectations are.
and it sounds like he wants to do something, and
Yeah.
let's let him
And
do it.
and really what the expectations are, that there's some kind of compatible, at least the
Right.
incorporation of some compatible building materials.
And a nice interaction with the street as opposed to closing it off completely.
And we may wanna see what the side fencing is too. I mean, we may have to, you know, what that's made out of. We probably wanna have some
Well,
say in that.
do we, or are we comfortable with these guys? Like the planning office, work with them?
We can, I mean, yeah, final design approval by Department of Community Development.
I'm just trying to simplify this guy's life.
We would likely need to issue a base standard if everyone is comfortable with that south and east end of the
Right.
fence as proposed, we will need to add a base standard modification to allow that portion of the fence to go in as you see here today. That way he can build that style of a fence, and then it really comes down to that west end. Your decision if you want to just work with staff or if you want them to come back with you.
Because that other fence facade or wall has got that 10-foot, so you're incorporating the 10-foot, so it's
Right.
got the 2-foot of base standard in it.
I'm perfectly comfortable letting the city staff work with him on the street side.
Yeah, as long as staff feels that it's not a situation where you feel uncomfortable being caught in.
Right.
We
You
can
insist on bringing it back.
we can handle it. If
All
we
right.
think we need to bring it back, we'll bring it back.
All right. So I need a motion, or do we have a motion? I'm lost.
So move is,
Okay, great.
Do we need to add within the 2 years?
Yes, we add on number 5, he will remove existing drive and replace curb and gutter within 2 years. And then he will work with, for number 4, he will work with city staff on the portion of the fence that faces the street. Make sense?
Yes.
And any discussion further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call the roll.
Kiefer,
Aye.
Harry,
aye.
Mott,
Aye.
Borsek,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Any business before we close for a workshop?
No, let's get to the workshop. We have 3 workshops to get through
Okay.
real quick.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, business is over. We have workshop coming up.
Fletcher's and